speakers this morning are no stranger to us. Combined, they have over 75 years of work in the field that they're experts in. Mike Walden is a William Neal Reynolds Distinguished Professor of Economics at NC State University. He has teaching, research, and extension responsibilities in the areas of consumer economics, economic outlook, and public policy. He's published 8 books and has published over 250 articles and reports. Dr. Walden directs the semi-annual economic forecast, the North Carolina Economic Outlook. He's won numerous academic and public awards, including the UNC Board of Governors Award for Excellence for Public Service and the Order of the Long Leaf Pine. We also have with us Blake Brown, who is a Hugh C. Kiger Professor of Agricultural and Resource Economics at NC State. He spent much of his career working on foreign policy, particularly tobacco policy. One of his major focuses was working with the policymakers on the federal tobacco quota buyout. From 2008 to 2014, Dr. Brown directed NC State's efforts to help farmers add or expand value-added enterprises. And in 2014, he became director of the North Carolina Tobacco Trust Commission Agricultural Leadership Program. He's also leading efforts to implement a business management program to fit unique needs of commercial farms in the Southeast. Both of these gentlemen have been here before and spoke at the Ag Forum, and it's my pleasure to welcome them back. And gentlemen, after what we've been through in 2016, I hope we're going to hear something that is rosy. And if it's not rosy, then you have my permission to exaggerate a little bit to make us feel better. Dr. Walden, welcome, and look forward to what you have to say.
I thought the commissioner was going to say, if it's not rosy, you're fired, but he would not do that. Well, good morning. Great morning. It's always good to wake up and see the sky and anticipate breakfast, which is my favorite meal, incidentally. And sometimes I have breakfast at all my meals. My job in 15 minutes is to give you an overview of what's happening in the general economy. A lot of buzz, as you know, about the general economy. We have a new administration in Washington that I think is focused on the economy as one of their #1 objectives, so let me get to it. I think the big national issues right now are the economic policies of the new Trump administration. In that regard, and very important to you, there's a big question about what the Trump administration will do regarding international trade. There's already been some movement there. You have a vested interest in that North Carolina agriculture is a big exporter. The Federal Reserve, you always have to be aware of the Federal Reserve, which has a great deal of influence over the cost of money if you're borrowing. What they're up to. They met yesterday, did not make any movements in short-term interest rates, but we'll see where they might go. And then I want to end by talking about some longer-run challenges, where we're going nationally and as well as in North Carolina with respect to some big changes, big movements over time. All right, the Trump administration, of course, any administration has many goals, but I think the big goal of the Trump administration is to accelerate economic growth. We have been growing nationally at a very tepid pace. Last year, we came in at under 2% for our economic growth rate, our aggregate economic growth rate. That's 50% under what the normal growth rate has been, annual growth rate has been since World War II. As a candidate, President Trump talked about doubling economic growth from 2%, which is actually average since the recession, to 4%. To do that, he's talked about taxes, reducing taxes. He's talked about spending $1 trillion on infrastructure. He hasn't said this specifically, but he's talked about expanding the capabilities of our military, which probably means more spending on the military, reduced regulations. He's already made some executive orders regarding that. Increased energy production, and reducing the trade deficit. So let me go through these in a little more detail. Getting used to the clicker here. Okay. On tax cuts, I think what we're likely to see from the Trump administration, we don't know exactly the timing, but what we're likely to see is a package that reduces tax rates both at the individual level and at the business level. So virtually every business, every individual would likely pay less in income taxes The big question is, well, several questions. One, how big will those reductions be? And then secondly, what might happen to deductions, exemptions, and credits, both on the business side and on the individual side. Candidate Trump did not say much about the latter during the campaign. His Treasury Secretary designate, Mr. Mnuchin, who looks like will now be confirmed, talked about perhaps some scaling back of various deductions and credits. In fact, he floated the idea of maybe some scaling back of the home mortgage interest deduction. So tax plans have to obviously go through the Congress. Whenever you talk about credits, deductions, and exemptions and changing those, various groups will mobilize. So I would not necessarily look for a smooth sailing on a tax plan. I think it may take a while. In fact, some of the Trump administration folks have said that we may not see a tax plan finished until the end of this year or the beginning of next year. Infrastructure, I think, may go faster. The president has talked about $1 trillion infrastructure plan. So we're talking about new roads, bridges, airports, seaports, electric grid. There was released a list the other day about projects that would likely be included, and I-95 was included in this, as well as some mention of the new pipeline, natural gas pipeline that's going through eastern North Carolina. So those two items apparently have reached the ears of the Trump administration. Always, when you're talking about major spending at the federal level, is how you're going to finance it. Typically, infrastructure programs in the past have been financed through higher taxes. The Trump folks have said, no, we want to try something innovative. We want to get the private sector involved. The idea of an 85% tax credit has been floated. So we will see. I think that the idea of spending more on infrastructure generally gets universal applause, both Democrats and Republicans. I think the big sticking point here may be how it's financed. The military, of course, North Carolina has a large presence of the military. It's an $11 billion industry, if you will, in North Carolina. If we're going to expand the military, the question for North Carolina is how's it going to be expanded? If it's going to be expanded in terms of personnel, adding some brigades, we may benefit. Fort Bragg is the largest military base not only in the country but the world. On the other hand, if it's equipment, the benefits here may not be as large. The president has already talked about regulations. This is something that virtually affects every industry. There was a study done by several economists, including a couple at Duke University, that came out recently that suggested that the cumulative impact of all the regulations that the federal government's passed since 1980 was to reduce annual economic growth by 0.8%. So this should not be overlooked. If we can make regulations more efficient, if we can be cautious of regulations in terms of weighing the benefits and costs, that could be a big push to economic growth. And then finally, energy. North Carolina actually has, at least according to current data, the largest potential reserves of oil offshore in the ocean. I think there will be a push now with a change in administration that now wants to access all forms of energy, to perhaps move to the next level of potentially exploring and seeing what it would take to access that energy. That could be, I've calculated, potentially a $2 billion a year annual industry in North Carolina if our energy reserves offshore were accessed. Now, of course, issues there, impact on commercial fishing, impact on tourism, etc. So certainly we want to think this through very, very carefully. Some numbers in terms of where we're going to make sure I'm on the right slide here. I'm not a tech person. There are lots of other issues out there, and I think this will be a very active administration. I've argued that we may see the most action in Washington that we've seen in terms of legislation since Lyndon Johnson. You've heard about the Affordable Care Act. Obviously, that's up for change. Minimum wage, education, national debt, Social Security, Medicare, revision of Dodd-Frank. That was financial re-regulation. Now, one that you're very interested in is immigration, because agriculture, farming in North Carolina relies on temporary workers who come through. I think it's estimated that about 150,000 temporary workers come through North Carolina a year. Many of those undocumented, so you have a vested interest in following the debate over immigration. All right, some numbers in terms of where at least this economist is thinking the economy is going to go over the next couple of years. Most economists have actually upped their forecast for economic growth, general economic growth, thinking that some of the Trump administration agenda will get through, and most of it is growth enhancing. Now there's a question about whether large amounts will have to be borrowed, and are we taking growth away from the future. But just in terms of the next couple of years, you can see my numbers here are all positive. You can see a slight acceleration in economic growth to 2.2 this year, 2.4. You don't see any 4% there. I think it's going to be and I hope I'm wrong, but I think it's going to be a fairly difficult job to get the economy growing at a 4% rate, and I'll mention why in a moment. Downside is that we're probably going to see a slight acceleration in inflation, not dramatic, not like the 13% inflation rate that I saw when I came to NC State in 1978, but you can see a slight acceleration in inflation. And we've already seen an upward movement in interest rates, especially long-term rates. And I think that's a reflection of the financial markets expecting more borrowing. Now, short-term rates are, to some degree, controlled by the Federal Reserve. Federal Reserve, just real quick background, the Federal Reserve did a lot of heavy lifting during the Great Recession. They took their interest rates they controlled from 5% down to 0%. They bought something like $4 trillion worth of financial assets, such as mortgages. They have been trying to unwind. That's a position they don't want to be in for a long time. They've been very cautious, however, in increasing that short-term interest rate. They went up 0.25% in 2015. They went up another 0.25% this past December. It's expected they're going to go up maybe 2 or 3 times, a 0.25% rise this year. Now, they met yesterday and did not make a move. President Trump, during the campaign, criticized the Federal Reserve policy of what he thought was being not taking into account what the very low interest rates have done to potentially creating a bubble on the Wall Street. And I think there's some validity in that concern. Now, the president will not be able to appoint his own chair of the Federal Reserve. Right now, the chair is Janet Yellen. Her 4-year term as chair is not up until February of next year. Don't know if the president will reappoint her or not. But she's indicated she's staying. But there are 2 vacancies on the Federal Reserve Board, and so the president can move at his pace to put people on that board. Of course, he has to go through Senate confirmation. So in the short run, he could have some influence over the Federal Reserve. But I would expect the Federal Reserve to nudge interest rates, short-term interest rates up this year. All right, let me talk a little bit about the North Carolina economy. We've had a pretty good year in 2016. On all the major economic metrics, we actually exceeded the nation. We actually did the same thing in 2015. So we've had a run of a couple good years. Don't get fixated, I'll say, on the unemployment rate. The last reading showed our unemployment rate going up, and of course that was the headlines in all the papers. You have to remember that the unemployment rate in part is determined by how many people who don't have jobs are actively looking for jobs. If you're jobless and you don't actively look for a job in the last month, you're not counted as unemployed by the official rate. So what typically happens when the economy improves is people who have given up looking for work, some of them start looking again. And until they get work, that can increase the number of folks who are unemployed and can increase the unemployment rate. So what I tell people is, don't so much focus on where the unemployment rate is going, focus on whether we're getting job growth. And we have seen job growth in North Carolina. We added about, we don't have the final numbers, we added probably about 85 to 90,000 jobs, payroll jobs in the state in 2016, and we'll likely see that same in 2017. Now, right now we have 230,000 folks who are officially unemployed in the state. I estimate there's probably another 200,000 who are unofficially unemployed. That is to say, they're folks who, again, have not been actively looking for work. So we do have some slack in the labor force to add folks to the labor force. And that's one reason why I don't think we're going to see that unemployment rate in North Carolina is hovering around 5%. I don't think we're going to see a big movement down. And again, I would not get worried about that. I don't think that's a good indicator right now in terms of where we are in the economy. I've been here almost 40 years, and for those 40 years, I think these two issues have been prominent. That is to say, when you look at the economy, you look at who's improving in the economy and what regions are improving in the economy, we do have some issues here. We have, I think, two major economic divides in North Carolina, economic divide between households and economic divide between regions. And I want to hasten to say, that's not unusual for any state. What's going on in North Carolina is very representative of what's going on nationwide. If you look at the economic divide between households, and you look at where jobs are being created, they're largely being created on the two ends of the wage spectrum. They're being created in high-paying jobs, which is good, but they're also being created in lower-paying jobs. And middle-paying jobs have been the slowest growing. And so that's contributing to this concept of income inequality that you hear about. It's creating an issue where if you're someone in a lower paying job and you want to move up the job ladder, those middle rungs are not so much there. A large number of those middle paying jobs are not growing. One reason being that's where technology is going. For example, manufacturing. We are in North Carolina manufacture today as much as we've ever manufactured. Yet fewer people are involved in factory work because factory work is increasingly being switched over from people to machinery and technology. And in fact, that's a worldwide phenomenon. So this is an issue, I think, quite frankly, this is an issue where our great community colleges can be very helpful because the goal of the community colleges, one of their goals is to train people in many technical fields, many vocational fields, HVAC people, electricians, carpenters, truck drivers, all those pay very good middle income wages. And I think that sector we could definitely see some growth in. The other big divide is between regions. You know about this. If you look at the scale here where I'm moving from large metros like Raleigh and Charlotte on the left-hand side of your screen, and then middle metros and then smaller metros, you can see traditionally growth rates have been fastest for the large metros, and then you scale down. Now, one thing that was different, if you look at the far right-hand side of your screen, the non-metros, so-called rural counties, saw a large increase in employment in 2016. You can see much greater than the average they had since the end of the recession. If you go behind the numbers here, what you see is a large number, a big reason for this was the increase in tourism and jobs related to tourism. So that indeed, of course, was a very good sign. But in general, you see the big metros have been the fastest growing. If we look at long-term trends now, and I think I'm sticking to my time. One long-term trend I represent, I'm old. In fact, the census tells me I'm old. I'm 66 now. Turned 65 last year. It was a horrible birthday because everywhere I turn, people say, oh, 65. Oh, the mail I got. Hey, you're old. Sign up for this. Sign up for Medicare. It was not a good birthday. This was much better. 66, people didn't pay any attention. But I'm part of a trend. We are an aging society. In North Carolina, for example, the percentage of people 65 and over is going to go from 13%, which was in the 2010 census, up to 21%. That's affecting everything. That's affecting what you do, the types of crops you grow, the types of products, food products that are made out of crops, nutrition, etc. You're seeing perhaps the impacts on your workforce. You don't find as many young people out there to hire. The birth rate, incidentally, has been going down at the same time that we're an aging society. That's something that's probably not going to change. So this is a long-term trend that's going to affect virtually every aspect of the economy. In terms of the workplace, I already mentioned technology. There's a concept economists use called technological unemployment. Simply means a job that a person held that now is being done by technology or a machine. And many economists think this is going to accelerate. We've already seen it done. I'll use a quick example. I mean, we think of it in the factory example, and of course, farming, agriculture, it didn't happen now. It's not happening now to the extent it happened 100 years ago. When 100 years ago, 2/3 of workers in North Carolina worked on the farm. Today it's 1%, and yet that 1% grows, Commissioner, much more than the 2/3 did years ago. But the technological revolution in agriculture, which I think has largely been overlooked, has been going on for 100 years. So you've been through that. But now we're seeing it come, for example, to the service sector, and we're continuing to see it come to the manufacturing sector. So a big question is, where will the new jobs come from if a lot of jobs are being taken over by technology? Economists don't have very good answers to that. We have some thoughts, but we don't have very good answers to that. So that's going to be a continuing debate. In terms of where we're going to live in North Carolina, the state demographer, we actually have a state demographer that works for the state that helps our leaders in the General Assembly look at demographic trends. You can't see the names from where you're sitting, but the darker shaded counties are the counties that are going to grow fastest. And what you see here is fastest growth in sort of that arc that goes from the Triangle over to Triad and down to Charlotte. Down east at Wilmington, the Wilmington area, also fast growth. But a lot of counties may actually lose people. And so North Carolina is moving toward being a more densely populated state, particularly in urban areas. And there are certainly pluses and minuses to that. Now I'm at the thank you part. So that was a whirlwind tour through the major issues of the economy. Again, thank you for what you do. Do not forget, you contribute to our state economy. Commissioner loves this number, $84 billion of annual output. That includes things farmers do, processors do, people who take those finished products, get them to restaurants and supermarkets, etc. It's the entire supply chain for food, forestry, and natural fiber products. And I know the Commissioner is anxious to get that up to 3 digits, and you will. So thank you very much.